to the show with your friend in mind. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. We couldn't be more excited today, even though it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, which I don't usually see this time on a Saturday morning, but I couldn't wait to get out of bed and talk to this man. This interview has been years in the making, I promise you people. Working out time zones, working out schedules, but we got here. He is a man who is... originates from Wales, who is now living with his family in Australia. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, LL Cool Lloyd, or Lloyd Langford, as he's also sometimes known. How are you doing, Lloyd?
Hello, how's it going?
So it's afternoon time for you, is that right? About 5 o'clock?
It's 5 o'clock. I'm doing a show this evening about 8:30. So I've got time to kill.
Excellent. Well, I'm thankful for you killing some bit with us here. Right, and I will just let's just do this publicly. I will apologize to Lloyd publicly because Australian time zones are not my friend, it turns out. Like, I just can't get the concept of a country being ahead of us. Every other interview I do, it's usually behind. Australia is just time traveling madness as far as I'm concerned.
That's fine. That's it's absolutely fine. I've made the mistake myself, so don't worry about that.
And you're looking lovely and tan, sir. It looks like it's agreeing with you.
Well, I've just been doing some shows. My partner Anne Edmonds is a comedian as well. We were doing some shows together in New South Wales, a place called Brunswick Heads, and she's obsessed with going to the beach. So we were going to the beach numerous times a day, and so this is probably the most tanned I've ever been.
You see, this is like a before and after chart. Sorry, ignore the breezes. But this like a before and after chart.
I mean,
this is what you look like before you go to Australia from the UK. This is after.
I'm still pretty pasty, but this is the most tanned I've ever been.
Oh, you may be an Australian pasty, but you're UK flush with tan. Like, oh god, it's you're practically ready for the only way is Essex as far as we're concerned. So yeah, you're actually at the Fringe at the moment, I believe.
I'm at the Perth Fringe, yeah. It's called Fringe World, and it usually, I think it's a month long, in January and into February. In the Southern Hemisphere, in Australia anyway, it's kind of the start of the festival season. So I'm here, and then next week I'll go and do Adelaide Fringe, and then some other smaller one-off shows, and then Melbourne International Comedy Festival starts, I think, end of March, beginning of April.
Brilliant.
And then you have Sydney Comedy Festival and Brisbane, New Zealand. So it's pretty much like January until, I don't know, June time, the festival season over here, the main festival season.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what are the fringes over in Australia like compared to the ones in the UK?
Well, I mean, there's a fucking load of Brits here. Like,
okay, keep the F-bombs at a minimum. I've got to edit this for radio later.
Okay, there's a large proportion of UK actually. I think there's a lot of like British shows here, like package shows, compilation shows where they have 3 or 4 comics, like, you know, an Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman kind of thing.
Nice.
Because I guess it's an exoticism here. It's like, you know, most of the comedians here are Australian, so like having overseas comics or whatever, kind of like myself, is slightly different.
Yeah, they even murmur as you're leaving. It's like, we've got a Welsh one this year.
Yeah. When Anne and I gig together, she introduces me and says, currently the funniest Welsh comedian currently working in Australia, because like I'm the only one.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about when you were starting up in comedy. Were you kind of quite confident? Was it something that you kind of aimed to do or just ended up doing? How did it all come about?
I used to do youth theatre in South Wales. I was a member of my local youth theatre group, and then there was a bigger one which was based in Swansea, which is called West Glamorgan Youth Theatre, which is where Michael Sheen went, and I think maybe Catherine Zeta-Jones. And I kind of got into that, and it was really good fun. You had a kind of residencies. You all kind of lived together, and you were kind of rehearsing every day, and and you were in dormitories, and then you put a show on at the end of it. Like it was a great experience, but I kind of realized I wasn't really an actor. I can't sing, I can't dance. I'm like the opposite of a triple threat. I'm like,
You put it right on your website. It's like a comedian, stand-up writer, limited range actor, I believe is how you worded it.
I can play a Welsh guy that talks slowly, and that's about it. But I loved playing the character roles, the comedy roles in youth theatre. That was the thing that I really enjoyed doing. The guy that came on, got the laughs or whatever, and then left again, and let the main actors get on with it. And then I went to university in Warwick. I think that was 2001, yeah, September 2001. And they have a Freshers Week there. But they have lots of different bands and entertainment and stuff for like the new students. And they had a comedy show, which was Chris Addison and Francesca Martinez. Yeah. And I was kind of in the audience watching the show, and I reckon about 10 minutes into the show, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. This is like, I've discovered the thing that I want to do. And it hadn't kind of occurred to me even as a possibility before. Francesca used to do a thing on stage where, because she has cerebral palsy and the tremors, she would offer to cut someone's hair in the audience. She would say, does anyone want a haircut? And it was like a joke, and it gets a laugh. And I think she used to move on. And I put my hand up and said, I'll have a haircut. So she was like, really? I was like, yeah, come on, give me a haircut. So I went up on stage, and she has the scissors and everything. And she's like trying to cut my hair and destroying it. Like, it's really funny.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And my friends were like, why did you do that? I was like, it was fun, right? Like, it's just hair. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But then I started gigging in the university. There was like limited opportunity, really. They had like open mic nights. People would play music or read poetry they'd written or stuff like that. And I was like trying to do stand-up comedy. And then I did some gigs. I think I did a gig in Leamington Spa, and a gig in. I went to Coventry to do So You Think You're Funny, which was a comedy competition, and then got through to the Edinburgh heat. So I think they call them the semi-finals, but there's 10 of them or whatever, right? They're not really semi-finals. They're like the heats before the grand final.
Yeah.
And that would have been August 2002. It's the first time I went to Edinburgh, and I was in So You Think You're Funny, and that's where I met Matt Ford, who I'm still friends with, another comedian, and also
the first the political bits, doesn't he? Impressions.
He does, yeah, political. He was doing impressions and stuff then, and then Rod Gilbert as well. That's where I first met Rod Gilbert. So so you
went to Edinburgh to meet a fellow Welshman who lives probably down the road.
Well, I think I was 18, or I just turned 19 maybe, and he was mid-30s, and like he was kind of, I wouldn't say he was aloof, but I could tell that he was older than a lot of us there, and also I think he had a bit more experience. Like when I was in So You Think You're Funny in Edinburgh, I reckon I'd done 10 gigs maybe in total, like ever, and I think he'd been doing stand-up in London and like had a bit more experience, and he was brilliant as well. He was he was already a kind of fully formed kind of personality. He's kind of surrealist and kind of shaggy dog stories, and like it was great. But one of the things that happened was that I think out of politeness, he said to me after the heat, "Oh, if I ever like bump into you again or whatever, or I'll see you again, or we'll gig together and all this kind of stuff." And I ended up bumping into him on a train. Him and his girlfriend were going to a wedding, and I was going to London, I think, to do like an open mic spot or something, and we kind of crossed paths. And he said, "Oh, I'm doing Edinburgh." This was the year after, so 2003. "Come and live with me, and you can fly here for my show and do open mics and all this kind of stuff." So that's basically how I started. I started going up to Edinburgh, staying on his floor and living with him, Greg Davis, Steve Hall, Marek Larwood. They were in We Are Clang, which was like this sort of...
Yeah, I remember it. It got like only one series on TV, but went on radio for quite a while. Is that
it was this kind of wild, dirty, sort of anarchic sketch show. It was very good. It was kind of... I think there was a lot of sketch comedy that was dominated by kind of Oxford University sort of, of an upper middle class sort of white guys basically doing... It felt like they were doing comedy to impress their parents.
Okay, let's not follow the thread of middle class white guys. Just
But they had a kind of completely different vibe, I think, to a lot of what was going on. And it was just an experience for me that they were all further ahead in comedy than I was. So they were, maybe I was getting 5-minute spots or 10-minute spots, and they were all doing 20s or whatever. I looked up to them, and it was just, I don't know, it was a formative experience going up to Edinburgh every year. And, I got to make friends, Simon Amstel, and you go to see Flight of the Conchords, where the only people who were watching them were other comedians in a tiny room in the caves. Like it was great. And it felt like there was a kind of camaraderie between all these people like myself who were new comedians or aspiring comedians. We were kind of all in the same boat, I guess.
Wow. And do you remember anything from your early kind of like 10-minute kind of stand-up?
I think I used to do a bit about going away for like a mate's birthday and us taking cocaine and going on a roller coaster. It was like the lunacy of this wild weekend in Blackpool. There was a bit, I remember there was a bit I did about someone saying to me, like a woman saying to me, the pleasure was very close to pain. And I used to say, no, it isn't, and like do this act out about like things that I found pleasureful and things I found painful. And it was just, you kind of, you're just writing jokes down on notepads and stuff and trying them out. Like I used to do one-liners. I used to I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just trying it all out, like tell stories and,
That's great. And I think that's obviously something which you need as you go forward in stand-up, is to be able to just like stand there and just kind of make things up, let it flow, read the audience. So it sounds like you already had those skills just naturally to begin with.
Well, I don't know. I think something that happened that I was conscious trying to avoid would be that there would be, and it's kind of almost impossible to completely avoid it, but there would be a famous comedian, or there would be a comedian that lots of open spot comedians would be trying to emulate. So I don't know, it was like Daniel Kitson, or I think more recently it's been like James Acaster or something like that. You'd see people. Stuart Lee was a massive one, you know, with people are trying to be Stuart Lee or trying to do.
See, Stuart Lee, I can see attempting because like putting long pauses, like repeat, like there is a certain formula to emulate him, even though you're not going to be as funny as him doing that. James Acaster, I couldn't imagine where you'd even start.
No, I think it sometimes it just happens unconsciously because if you're a newer comic and you're seeing a lot of the same performer everywhere, just something that kind of like maybe leaches into your style and stuff. So I was always just, you know, there was no way I was going to copy what Rod was doing because he was this kind of surrealist, sort of long form nonsense about his family, and like it was.
He does this unusual thing, which I absolutely love, and just is so uniquely him, is like a surrealist curmudgeon. You don't get those two together often, but he puts those into his acts, and it works brilliantly.
His style now is very different as well from
True.
from how it was then. He's far more curmudgeonly now, and you know, exasperated rants and stuff like that. Whereas he was more kind of lyrical and kind of almost poetical in that they were kind of like made up stories about his family, and like, you know, there was animals in them, and they, you know, there was kind of there was no one else doing it really. And I think he would probably say himself that he kind of realized that like it's a difficult thing to do in clubs, certainly like comedy clubs, when you know, it may be like Friday night at the Cardiff Glee or something, but you've got like 410 drunk Valleys people. You have to be maybe a bit more punchy, a bit more kind of dynamic.
People from the Valley who haven't laughed in a good 10 years. And I'm not saying that about all people in the Valleys. Okay. I'm not saying anything. You mentioned before about some of the other sort of contemporaries of yours when you were up in Edinburgh. The way I kind of got into sort of like Welsh comedy and all the wonderful Welsh comedians was pretty much through Rod's Saturday morning radio show, which you'd go on with him. What I loved about that is like not only were you two absolutely hilarious, but because Rod would tour so much, he even made a joke out of it after a while that he was not on the show more than he was on it, like, you know, for a year run. But you just get all these influx of different comedians, and you'd be sometimes on with some of them. It seemed like a wonderful, like it did feel like there's a wonderful community around Welsh comedians.
I think that was to do with Rod as well. Like I would do tour support for him on a tour that would start out being, I don't know, 6 or 7 months long, and then would end up being like a 2-year long tour. So not from start to not consistently for 2 years, but like you're touring the same show for that amount of time, and you're on the road a lot. And you know, it was a Saturday morning radio show that I reckon, you know, it was supposed to be Radio Wales. Probably 15% of the shows were done in Cardiff. They were in that time anyway. We would just go into BBC studios wherever we could, and you know, that was the thing. It was like, oh, you know, we're in Birmingham this weekend, and so is Sarah Millican or something like, you know, so is one of these other performers, or we're in Ireland, you know, let's get like an Irish comic, like, because it was, I don't know, it was a fun, you know, getting guests on the show and stuff. It was like an interesting dynamic, and you know, they were most of the time they were friends, people Rod had gigged with before, or I gigged with before. And
it was a Goldie Looking Chain were quite regular kind of guest hosts in any rotation. It was just whichever couple of members of Goldie Looking Chain or one member was available. What are those guys like to hang out with?
I mean, I think they are fun as well, you know. And that Rod would always, you know, he would come back from Australia, or he would come back from somewhere and be like, all right, this is a new comedian friend who I've met, or like I met like Charlie Pickering, who is an Australian comic through Rod. Like I think we lived together for a bit in London, and he I don't know. He was very open to other people. He's a very generous person, I think, and he's very open to other people and what they could bring to the show. So I was in school with I was in high school with Pancho from Goldie Looking Chain. So
Right.
I kind of knew him a little bit anyway, and his mother worked in the school, and then um I think I made like a pilot for a TV show with Pritchard maybe, and I'd kind of met, you know, I'd met them through other means as well, but then also there was the radio show.
Okay, I'm just so glad you backed up what I thought. That's that you all went to school together. You all hung out in the same town. Thank you. You've confirmed it now. That's just right now.
Well, I mean, I guess the comedy, the Welsh comedy scene at that point it's probably bigger now, but there weren't that many people there. It's
And
like
it seems like everyone. Look, I obviously I don't know everyone from that generation, but it seems like there was a good hit rate from people who would kind of like be on the Rod Gilbert show and would kind of like I mean, maybe it's what you're saying of Rod Gilbert introducing so many comedians, but it seemed like there was a good hit rate for people to go on to do a lot of things afterwards.
I think so. Yeah, he was very supportive of newer comics, and I think it's weird when you start out because there are established comedians that are the opposite.
Yeah,
You're in a dressing room and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And they're kind of actively unpleasant. And I don't know if that's because they see newer comedians as a threat to their kind of established status,
yeah,
or whether they're like, I can't be bothered meeting new people all the time. When you're every time you do a gig, there's some fresh-faced young whippersnapper desperately trying to get more laughs than you. I I imagine it can be quite frustrating, but
yeah.
no, Rod was always the welcoming, and certainly to me, as he was giving me work on his radio show, tour support. We'd write together, we did TV shows together,
Yeah.
um, on the radio panel shows, like worked very closely together, and also, holiday together, and became good friends.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, you were sharing a place at one stage. I love the one of my favorite things on the radio show was when Everrod was away. You knew when he came back there was going to be some tale of misfortune he'd been through on his holiday. You didn't want it for him, but you knew that it would be a good like hour of radio, or sorry, a couple hours of radio. Are there any which stick in your mind?
One thing that he did, he invited me on holiday with him. So I'm really into, I mean, maybe less so now, but I was really into blues music. I still like blues music, right? But I like all kinds of music. But at this point, I kind of obsess about stuff. So, I'm obsessed about jazz or dub reggae or golden era hip hop or whatever. But at this point, I was really into blues music. He invited me on holiday with him to Chicago. He said, "We'll go to Chicago. It's got like essentially the history of electrified blues music, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Chuck Berry. Like, it's all Chess Records. They've got the clubs there. We'll go to gigs, all this." I was like, this is great. So I booked my flights and booked the hotel and all this. And then he contacted me. We were going in I think it was early January. I reckon he contacted me in early December and said, I'm not coming on the holiday anymore. So I went on holiday with his girlfriend and his best mate from school. Went to Chicago, just the three of us. And the reason why he didn't come on the holiday is because he got asked to do Michael McIntyre's Christmas comedy roadshow, some big BBC One TV gig that he couldn't get out of. So yeah, me and his girlfriend and his best mate from school, who I'd never met before, all went on holiday together. Had a great time.
For some reason, the best mate from school makes it even funnier. I don't know why. It's awesome. You mentioned, well, we're talking about radio work here, but the other one which I absolutely love, which you guest appeared on, was oh god, The Unbelievable Truth. Sorry, I want to say Would I Lie to You for a second there. The Unbelievable Truth on radio with David Mitchell. That is such an amazing show. What's it like to kind of like? I think putting together a lecture must be the most fun for a comedian.
I absolutely love doing that, and I sadly haven't been able to do. I think I did 1 or 2 episodes from Australia during lockdown.
2 back to back, yeah. So there was at least a couple you were in.
But you need to be in the studio, in the theatre or whatever, really, to do it justice. Yeah, that's a pleasure. I mean, I think David Mitchell's probably one of the sharpest people I've ever worked with in terms of speed of thought, kind of improvising, and he's phenomenal. And it's a great show for me as a writer and a comedy writer and a comic, because, like you say, you have to formulate the lecture and you're trying to put all the gags in, and also then you're trying to, like, I don't really care about winning the game, to be honest. Like,
no, I mean, it's always more funny when you don't care about that. Yeah. I think that's why American networks have trouble when they try and bring our formats over there, because they care about winning the show, which, like, they don't realize it's about the jokes in between. The quiz doesn't matter. Like, the points are pointless.
That's it's a great format, and it's just like a real fun show to do. And I've worked with like some excellent people on there, and like it's a joy to do that show. It's something whenever I get asked to do it, I'm like, yeah, like if I wasn't in Australia now, but like when I was in the UK, you just want to do it as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely great show. By the way, for anyone who hasn't listened, please do check it out. It's like basically you've got to smuggle 5 truths in a lecture just full of lies on a different subject. So it could be, tell us about bananas. So you talk about bananas, and you sneak in 5 truths, and just the rest is rubbish, and everyone's got to buzz in and guess. And you lose points if you guess incorrectly. It's just a wonderful format. It's sort of like it's close to Would I Lie to You, but different enough it doesn't feel like the same show as well.
Yeah. Probably, maybe for legal reasons.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would guess that would. It might come into it, yeah. Live at the Apollo was one which I wanted to talk to you about. There's comedians I've spoken to about this always say their kind of favorite bit is picking the bit of music they come out to. What was your tune you came out to?
Well, I've never done I've played the Apollo, but I've never done the TV show Live at the Apollo. So
I might have
that's all right.
Misgot a credit there. Maybe it was literally Live at the Apollo.
I've written on Live at the Apollo for I think I wrote for Rod on it, and I supported him on tour there at the Apollo.
It's a great venue, though. Aside from my misresearch, that is a wonderful place. I've been there for quite a few gigs. It is a grand theatre.
I think one of the only times that the audience cheering when you come onto the stage, you can physically feel it hit you in the face. There's like a gust of wind from all of the clapping and cheering, and I was just supporting Rod there when he was doing. I can't remember the name of the tour, but I think he would usually come out and do a bit of like preamble and then introduce me and give me like a big introduction. I came out and like this kind of energy just like kind of hit me in the face. It was insane. It just sets you up for like adrenaline, like a really great performance. And I've actually seen other stuff there. Like I've been in the audience for stuff there. I think I saw Chris Rock there, and I used to be in I used to live with a musician, and his band supported James Blunt on tour at the height of like Blunt Mania. I don't know if it was called that, but you know, when that it was
It
just
was
that
called a
one
lot of
act.
things back then, but he's got a wonderful sense of humor about it, though.
I went to see him there, and I, me personally, I don't like seeing comedy in venues that size. It does very little for me. Like huge venues, um, I much prefer to see someone performing in a smaller space. When I first started, maybe not the first tour with Rod, but second tour, maybe he was playing kind of 1,200 seat theaters, those old kind of I think Frank Matcham or whatever, those kind of, you know, with the balcony and all that, but like 1,200. And I remember thinking at the time, I mean, they weren't there to see me, they were there to see him. But I remember thinking, this is about it. Like, this is, I know you can do 4,000-5,000 seat arenas or whatever, but like, this to me kind of feels like perfect, you know?
Absolutely wonderful. And is there a sort of size of room that's your ideal to play?
I mean, if you do a gala or something like that, like they're usually in a big theatre. I think the Palais in Melbourne's like 2,900 or something, and that gives you it's a different set of circumstances as well, because the audience know it's a comedy gala. You've only got 6 minutes or something like that. You know, there's too many comedians on the bill. Often they want to get you there in the afternoon and get you in hair and makeup and do all the run-throughs and all this kind of stuff. So playing those like huge venues, like I mean, that's exciting, but I like a comedy club, you know. I like a low ceiling, and I like being able to see the crowd, and like, you know, I did
hear the feet sticking to the carpet. The proper old comedy clubs.
I did very early on in my career. I did tour support for Russell Brand, and one of the venues we played that was Aintree Horse Racing Pavilion, which is a room where they run horses round. I think it was 4,000 people. And it's just like a soulless aircraft hangar. I mean, he would have been making a shit ton of money. Don't get me wrong. Like it's huge, thousands of people, but in terms of like an enjoyable experience for an audience member, I don't rate it, to be honest.
Yeah. For some reason I can just picture, as you're doing your routine, just there exercising some horses in the background.
No, there weren't
using
any.
this space.
There weren't any horses there then, but.
One of your earliest credits, or your earliest credit on IMDb at least, is The King is Dead. By the way, anyone watching, I'm not just breaking this to you. We haven't lost another one. We're okay. But the credit was The King is Dead. What was that show?
Oh, that was a mess, that show. That's the best way of describing that. It was a format with, I think it was Simon Bird from The In-Betweeners.
Yeah.
Katie Wicks. Who else was in it? Johnny Sweet, I think, was in it. And I think it was something that they'd done in Edinburgh as like a live show. And it's like a panel show where they had different celebrities on, and they each had to try and audition to be, the king has died or the queen has died, and they had to audition to be the new monarch. I did some writing on it, and also did studio warm-up. And studio warm-up, I've done studio warm-up for various different things, like QI and, Never Mind the Buzzcocks and all those kind of shows. And it's a thankless task, really, because you're on at the start and you're trying to sort of G the audience up and stuff. And then you know, if the audience are bad or whatever, you get blamed for it, and if the audience are great, then the panel are like, well, we're all wonderful. But the King is Dead. I reckon when I went on to do the warm up, they were still writing the show. So the first time I did the warm up, you have a floor manager that says, you know, right, time to go on and do the warm up, and you know, normally if I was doing studio warm up before QI or Buzzcocks or something like that, you'd have often the panelists might be around as well, so you could, you know, I might be able to chat to Phil Jupitus or, you know, another performer there, whatever, and you do 10 minutes or something, and then they're like, right, we'll start the show. I went on to do The King is Dead, and I'm just making jokes. I'm just chatting away. I'm like, I'm looking over every now and again, thinking, where's the floor manager? But you know, you just got to keep going. And then eventually, the floor manager's like, right, we're ready to start recording the show. And I was like, great. And I like walked off the studio, and he goes, do you know how long you were on there doing warm up for? I said, no, it was long though, wasn't it? It was like half an hour or something. He goes, it was 52 minutes. So I did an hour of warm up before they'd even recorded anything.
Nice.
And I was frequently doing, I reckon I was frequently doing like 2 hours of warm up during the recording, because they would pause to change the set or, you know, eliminate a contestant or whatever. It was wild.
And you're like, wait a minute, I just did 2 hours. I can condense that into a tight hour. I'm out of here. A couple of shows which I'll sort of ask you about together. When Rod was doing his work experience show, you started doing little skits, but it was when he did the Ask Rod Gilbert show that you sort of were a bit more involved in the show, got to do a little bit more. What was it like doing those little bits with Rod?
Well, Ask Rod Gilbert, he asked me to do the pre-show sketches for work experience, and we kind of did them. I mean, they were
Yeah.
I think they were pretty slight, but Ask Rod Gilbert was a format that had been brought to Rod, and you know, they were making it on the BBC and stuff, and it was, I think Rod and Greg were, you know, locked in for it basically, and they were like, we're going to do like a run through, and who do you want to use for the run through? And Rod said, we'll use Lloyd, and we did a run through in Television Centre, I think it was, and then there was producers there and people from the BBC and stuff. And after the run through, I know run through had gone well. Someone at the BBC said, who do you want to have on the show then? And Rod said, well, I want to hit Lloyd on the show. And the guy was like, yeah, all right. And we kind of left the meeting. I remember we kind of left the BBC, and Greg was sort of shaking my hand and like hugging me and stuff. And I was like, what's going on? And he goes, you're going to be on the show, mate. I said, no, I don't think so. Like that's, I don't know. I kind of misinterpreted what had happened. But yeah, we did a couple of series of that panel show. I think we were sort of hamstrung by the fact that it was Rod, Greg, and me, and the production company wanted to make a family-friendly Saturday night 7 p.m. style panel show, and we were definitely the wrong people for that.
I just remember, like, there was it sticks in my head because I'm a big Kevin Smith fan, but you had him like I guess the way they did it must have been at the end of junkets, and they just go, could you just quickly answer this question for Ask Rod Gilbert? And it's like, I just think of the researcher who had to go, it's like, could you talk about milk for a second, Kevin? Like, just talk about like, because it was about, he wanted to know if he was drinking the right milk, and then you talk about different kind of types of milk and stuff like that from different animals. And I just imagine a research going, would you mind?
I was pretty young as well, you know. I think I was in my early 20s, maybe mid 20s or something, and you know, we had like David Hasselhoff was on the show, and like Carol Vorderman and David Tennant, and like it was kind of, it was an experience. I'll say it was definitely an experience, and we were writing the show, and it was pretty intense. But like I enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed working with them. Like they're two of the funniest people I've ever met, and being able to work with your mate as well.
I mean, it was a really great fun show.
It was. I don't know if it was a really great show, but it was also on a. I think the production company wanted it on at Saturday night at 7 p.m. or whatever, but it was actually on at like 10:30 on a Tuesday night, which is that's a death knell of a time slot, and they still had this kind of family friendly mentality that used to drive me up the wall, because like I remember there was one part of one of the episodes where I always got like gunged, or something would happen at the end of the episode where I would get made to look like an idiot, and at the end of one,
the last ask with the contestant.
It was like
the winner or whatever,
a challenge or whatever with the winner, and there was one where at the end of the show I was covered in feathers or gunge or whatever, and Greg came over and was like, "How you feel?" And I said, "I feel all right, actually." And he goes, "You're covered in all this stuff." And I said, "Yeah, but I can wash it off, and you're still going to be a fat prick tomorrow." And it got like a huge laugh. I think it's a play on a Winston Churchill thing, where the lady asked her sister Churchill, you're drunk, and he says, "I'll be sober in the morning, you'll still be ugly," right? But it was just that. And then the production company came over and they were like, "Oh, you can't call him a fat prick." And I was like, it's 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Surely I can call him a fat prick. They were like, no, you have to re-record it and call him like a fat idiot or something. It was, I don't know. I think I kind of understand it as well. The thing with television formats, I think even this television format, they'd piloted it like a few years before with Russell Howard, and it had gone nowhere. And then I think the BBC in Northern Ireland, we were completely unaware of this, but I was doing Edinburgh Festival before the first series came out, and I was chatting to Jason Byrne, and he goes, "That show you're doing with Rod?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It's already on TV in Northern Ireland." And the production company had somehow pitched it to like Northern Irish BBC, who'd rejected it and then basically made their own version of it. So there was like a rival. There was a rival like version of the show going on, and also we were filming some of the episodes in Northern Ireland as well. Like there was a lot going on.
I don't know if you've met the comedian Rob Lloyd over there. He does kind of shows touring across Australia, and he's done some TV work and things like that. But when I was talking to him, he worked on the show called "I'm So Glad You Came," or it's something like that, or "I'm Glad You're Finally Here." And it was it was a format which in the UK went for one series, didn't really go anywhere, Angus-Dean, and just got cancelled after the first series. Whereas in Australia, it's now in series 20 or whatever. Like it was a huge hit. It's really funny to see these parallel worlds where something makes it in one country and doesn't in the other.
Yeah, I think the format. I mean, there was problems with the production company, and this rival format, and I think someone from the other show turned up to one of our recordings and wore a T-shirt or something, trying to expose the fact that we were making the same show, or I don't know. It was
Jesus.
It was a sort of convoluted.
You came out, your tires were let down.
Yeah, I don't know.
A warning in lipstick written on the front.
I was unfamiliar with the Northern Irish comedy on television, so it was. It's not like we knew about. Well, I didn't know about it.
Well, I mean, my mum's Northern Irish, so I believe I can say this. If there's one thing I know about the Northern Irish, not that passionate about stuff. They're very calm, very measured. We're an even people. Now, there's a couple which you did some writing on. I'm guessing with Man Down, it's obviously the Greg Davies connection and Buzzcocks through Rod, maybe that you got involved. But like, how do you find working in these writers' rooms?
Well, Buzzcocks actually was through Simon Amstel.
Oh, cool.
I used to be a big fan of Buzzcocks when I was like a teenager with Mark Lamar, and I used to watch it like every Friday night. When I was doing flyering in Edinburgh one year, I would flyer for like Rod's show. I think sometimes I would flyer for like We Are Clang, but they were doing a compilation show as well. It was like the Hackney Empire show. I can't remember the name of it, but it was just a revolving lineup of different kind of new comedians. So like Rod did it, Greg did it. There was a woman who had a character called Nina the Cleaner, who was like a cleaning lady. There was an American comic who was really actually welcoming to me called Brandy Bohr. She would like MC a lot of the shows. Ed Petrie was on it. One of the other people on it was Simon Amstel, and I used to fly with him on the Royal Mile, and I didn't know who he was really, but like I remember we were flying one day and people were coming up to him and asking for like photographs and, you know, selfies and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, what? And he was hosting Pop World then, I think with Makita, which was on Channel 4, which was
part of E4.
E4,
yeah. Saturday and Sunday morning. I think it went out on both days on Channel 4.
And then I kind of became friendly with him, and we gigged together a bit in London, and we used to always end up at the same weird charity gigs together. And he became the host of Buzzcocks and was just looking for new writers. And he'd been to see my Edinburgh show, I think, and my debut show, which was in 2006, I think, solo show. And I had to kind of audition, which was in the writing room with a bunch of other kind of auditionees. And then, I worked with him on Buzzcocks. I think it was a couple of series, and then I did a series where they had the guest hosts.
Yeah.
When they were ostensibly looking for a new host, but then they did the guest host for ages, and then Rod took it over. I wrote for him on Buzzcocks then, and I was on an episode. I think I was dressed as a choir boy. It was like a Christmas special with what's his name that used to manage Westlife, and he was a judge on Britain's Got Talent.
Oh, Simon.
Not Simon Cowell, but the Irish guy.
Oh, I can picture him. I can't think of his
name.
name.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And then I think Buzzcocks finished, and then Greg started hosting it, and then I was writing for Greg as well. So I've worked a lot on that show, actually.
Oh, you went into the new version as well.
Yeah, the Sky version. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I'm always worried when Sky do something and they make the show longer, because I think comedy sometimes can benefit from a half-hour format. They made it like an hour long, including adverts and stuff. But I've got to say, they like Greg's done a wonderful job of opening up. He just has a bit more chat with the kind of contestants before it starts. I think it worked the way I think he's made it work very well. I think like sometimes, they're stretching out a format which doesn't need stretching out, but it works really well in that one. Yep. So getting on to where you've moved over to Australia, do you have to kind of modify your act a lot? Are there different sensibilities to the sense of humor? How's that been?
I guess I kind of have it's a sort of advantage, I guess, in that I can kind of comment on aspects of Australian culture or Australian news or politics with a kind of outsider point of view, which they kind of enjoy, you know, being made fun of. I can sort of bring that, like, this doesn't make any sense to me because I'm not from here kind of vibe. So that's been fun. I mean, I kind of I'd worked over here a bit. Like I did a tour over here, like a road show, and I'd done some festivals and stuff. But I met my partner, and then she's a comedian as well. We were kind of the plan was to kind of spend our time between Australia and the UK, and then COVID happened. I came over here February 2020. I mean, comedy's about timing, and I think I messed up there. Like COVID happened. COVID was already happening, but we weren't entirely sure of the extent of it. But yeah, and I've been here since then. Like I came back to the UK for a couple of months in just gone July, August, a bit of September, because we have a daughter now, and my parents obviously desperate to meet her, and a friend of mine called Dan Atkinson, who I used to do like a live shows with, and I did the Comedy Zone in Edinburgh with him. It was me, him, John Richardson, and Janice Fair. He got married, so I went back for the wedding, and I did a couple of weeks at the Fringe. But it was the Edinburgh Fringe. It was the show I'd been doing in Australia, like a kind of modified version of the past 2 years. I think when you're not from somewhere, like my references are different.
Yeah, because that's something I was wondering about, because I've heard other comedians, like just one bit sticks in my mind when Ricky Gervais was doing a bit in America, a bit where he talks about someone eating pie and chips, like it suddenly became a burger and fries, just little things like that. Are there any kind of changes like that you have to make to your acting?
You have to kind of do that. I think you have to have a sensitivity to what the audience understands, but that's usually, the routine doesn't rely on, I used to have a routine about like a night in a Weatherspoons. And it was all this stuff about Weatherspoons and observational stuff about Weatherspoons, and it was like lots of people in fancy dress. I think it was Christmas time or something like that, and there was a fight in the street, and I had this whole routine about it. And I remember going to New Zealand for the first time and just kind of going, well, I can't do that bit. Like, I'm not. Sometimes you see comedians, and you can tell they've crowbarred in these other references that don't kind of work but sort of work.
Yeah.
And the story sort of falls apart, really, because it's like, equally, I've done shows with American comedians, I wouldn't name them, where they haven't changed any of their references at all, and they just do what they've been doing in Los Angeles to a increasingly bemused audience because they don't care.
Yeah.
But I think most of the time, also because I've been living over here now for 2 or 3 years, so most of my references are things that they're stories that have happened to me while I'm here. And Anne's, my partner's good because I can say, I can run things past her, say, do you guys know about this? Or, what's an equivalent for this? Or,
And are you trying to teach your kid, like, I'm just thinking, like, your kid's grown up in Australia. Are you trying to, like, throw in a bit of Welshisms for her to pick up?
Yeah, we call her a little muchin, which is a piglet. I think she's, I obviously sound like this, but Anne, my partner, sounds like a normal Australian. So I'm hoping she sounds more like Anne than me.
Oh, you're not tempted to crowbar things in. It's like, I'm just going to grab something from the property ping.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm not doing any of that.
Good man. You're a better man than me. I'd be doing it just to wind up my partner, but that's another story. I wanted to talk about a couple of projects you've got on the go at the moment. So the island, which was created by yourself, that's got to be exciting.
Well, that kind of came about as an idea. I was on holiday with some other comedians in New York, and we kind of came up with this game that we were playing every night. I mean, it's just kind of stupid idea, really. But it kind of got commissioned through Dave, and I was in Australia the whole time, and we were doing kind of Zoom meetings and run throughs and trials and trying to make it work. And I don't think it worked. So I think there I don't think there'll be a second series of that. But I kind of their production team were very keen for me to come over to the UK, and I think at the time Anne was pregnant, and it was kind of an impossible thing to do, really. I think I would have normally had more of a hands-on kind of, you kind of want to be there during the run-throughs, and you want to have more involvement in various aspects of the show. And I think there were kind of 4 different comedians involved in it, and it's collaboration. I think it's wonderful, and like I love it. It is a lot of compromise, though. You have an idea, someone else has a different idea, someone else has a different idea. You've got to try and like make it work. But yeah, it was. I have very fond memories of a holiday in New York and playing the game every night. We also got stuck in New York because of like a snowstorm, so we had extra time there. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Oh, it sounds amazing, and it's kind of just it just seemed exciting that it was like created by you. It's like it's something that you've got to kind of work on from the start. Hopefully, it's given you something for the future, even if that's not a goer.
I think you just in comedy you kind of you have ideas and you get to explore them. Like I wrote a joke yesterday and did it on stage for the first time last night, and it got a big laugh. And it didn't exist. I'm not saying it didn't exist in its entirety of the world. I'm not that egotistical, but like it didn't exist in my show yesterday, and then it did. And equally, I might try a new joke tonight that just falls on its ass. So it's all about just. I enjoy the process of the creation as well. You're kind of creating ideas and trying to get ideas across to an audience and make them laugh. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I might do the same new joke tonight and it might not work tonight, and then I'm like, I'm in trouble now. I've got to do it. That means I got to do it tomorrow, and then make a decision on it, and
And it just seems like still such an exciting time post-COVID. I think we're all still enjoying. Like I still think, even though we return to normal in a lot of ways, I still think there's this pleasure out of things a bit more, like going out and seeing live comedy, seeing live gigs, and things like that. Has that been your experience?
As a performer, I really enjoyed COVID. I'm not going to lie.
A lot of comedians have said that.
I kind of I've been doing comedy, I think professionally since 2006, 2005, but I started when I was in university 2001. That's like 21 years ago, and kind of really been my only job since then. And COVID was the only time so far in my comedy career where I wasn't allowed to work. Like I was
Yeah.
I was forbidden from working, and I thought it was great. I could just have a break, and I wasn't I wasn't particularly interested in Zoom gigs. I I think there's an intimacy and an immediate kind of response from a live audience that I didn't think you could really achieve over Zoom. So I wasn't trying to do those Zoom gigs and stuff. I was just I listened to a lot of jazz music and sat on my ass, and it was great.
Sounds lovely, and not a bad time when your daughter's just coming into the world.
Well, I mean, I know people are worried about their jobs, and as a performer as well, it's like we were at the Adelaide Fringe, I think, when they announced that Melbourne Comedy Festival was cancelled and New Zealand was cancelled and Edinburgh was cancelled, and there was a show on before us that was like, there was, I don't even know what you would call them. They did like physical hula hooping and,
wow,
like they were skilled people, like carnies, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Sort of circus kind of act.
Yeah, circus. Yeah. That's right. Shit. And I remember seeing them backstage, and they were crying. They were really upset. And one of them showed me her phone, and it was just all of her work, for the next 9 months or whatever, just cancelled. And there was a kind of fear of like for the live performance for a lot of the arts, like, this is really bad. And I had festivals and I had work in the diary and stuff, and it all just disappeared. And I'm not saying in a blasé kind of way that was brilliant. I think in hindsight, for me personally, like having the time off, I found useful. And then when you go into the next festival, I was kind of re-energized, and like you say, I was excited, and audiences were as well, because they were like, comedy's back, and we can go out and do this thing again that we love to do.
Okay, so if any clickbait writers are out there, Lloyd Langford says COVID a good thing. No, please don't. So your current gig, show, pardon me, is Current Mood. So tell us a bit about that. You're workshopping it at the moment up there in the Fringes, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm here. Perth Fringe, but I've got like a couple of nights left, and then Adelaide Fringe, and then I'm doing some other like one-off shows and stuff, and then kind of Melbourne Comedy Festival end of March, I think beginning of April, and then there's Sydney, Brisbane. I'm hoping to go back to New Zealand. I love performing there and just visiting there.
Yeah. I just discovered New Zealand comedy. They put their version of Taskmaster appeared on YouTube, so I checked it out. Absolutely wonderful, so funny. They've
got some great comics there, and the festival's great as well. It's like quite small, and you get to work with the Kiwi comics, and the Kiwi audiences are like wonderful, and that's great. I haven't been able to go there because of COVID, and they haven't done the festival, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years, but I think it's back now, and I'm hoping I'll get over for that.
I mean, I feel like in some ways New Zealand is Australia's chill little brother, just next to them. Like there's something wonderful about the sense of humor over there.
Yeah, they also were like, they dealt very well with COVID, and that's the reason why I wasn't able to go there. Is they shut the borders and said, no, like, you're not coming in. So, I mean, they have had cases there and stuff, but I think internationally they're probably the country that's dealt with it the best.
Yeah. I don't think we've done as well as we might have done in the UK.
Well, I think the UK is probably on the other end of that.
A little bit. At least we've got stable leadership at all times throughout the whole thing. Have you just got 5 more minutes?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh, awesome. What I thought I'd do, just a bit of fun to end the interview. You put on your frequently asked questions on your website a list of your interests apart from comedy. So I thought maybe we just go through them. You just say a little bit about these kind of pastimes, just for a bit of fun.
Okay, I haven't updated this website
I
for
know,
a long time.
which I thought would be half the fun, to be honest. Crazy golf. Oh, that's good.
I'm very passionate about crazy golf. I mean, I believe deep down that all golf is crazy, but there's just something. I think it's a fun thing to do with a bunch of other people, and you don't have to have any sporting skill, which is handy for me.
It works for all situations as well. You can take your family, you can have a few drinks with the lads and go and play it, like whatever.
Yeah. I haven't. You're making me hanker for it now. I haven't played it for ages, but I used to play it. New Zealand has actually some really good crazy golf courses. There's one in Wellington where a guy has just made it out of scrap metal. It's on like a hillside in Wellington, and like usually when I go to New Zealand for the comedy festival, I'll put like a group message around the Kiwi comics and say, let's have like a crazy golf tournament, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, one which I really love in Cardiff is they've just put it on the top of the St David's, which is absolutely huge, the mall. Like at the top, you've got a crazy golf. I think it's by Go Ape. I'd highly recommend it to anyone who's up there in Wales. Yeah, I loved a bit which David Gorman used to do about crazy golf as well, where it was like the worse spelt it is, the better the crazy golf. So if you've got a K at the beginning, that's a good sign. It's got a few extra R's, you're in for a good time. So you mentioned it already, and I believe these two go together, so I'm going to combine them. Post-war Chicago blues music and single malt whiskey. I think those two should be a combined hobby.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was a point where I was absolutely like fixated with post-war Chicago blues. We went to Chess Records in Chicago, me and Rod's best mate from school, for like a tour, and there was a guy there on the desk, and I started asking him questions. He was like, if you've got any questions, then I think he would, it's just something he would say to tourists, and they would, I reckon 99 times out of 100, they're asking him about the Rolling Stones or something like that. And I started asking him questions, and he was like, mate, I've never been asked these questions before. I'm going to have to go and get a book and look them up.
We got a pinball. Have you actually got any yourself? Because that's a crazy hobby when people buy them.
Oh, the pinball machines?
Yeah.
No, when I did busking festival in New Zealand and in Christchurch, and there was what was it called? It was a pinball machine that was based on the Universal horror creatures, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein's,
the Mummy,
the Bride of Frankenstein, those.
Yeah.
We used to play on it obsessively every day, and I got T-shirts made for the group with the Christchurch Ballers.
Nice.
Which I've still got, and it's going to really annoy me. I can't remember the name of the machine. Anyway, Rose Matafeo was one of the comedians, and after this, because we were talking about pinball all the time and talking about this particular machine, she got contacted by this person that was like, "Oh, we are New Zealand's pinballing family, and we've got like 15 pinball machines in our house. Do you want to come to our house and play some pinball?" And she told me this, and she goes, I said, "Are we going to go?" And she's like, no, that would be too weird. And I was really like, I definitely would have gone. I mean, it would have been weird, but
yeah, embrace the weird. Golden Age hip hop on the music tip again.
Yeah,
so what for you is Golden Age hip hop for a start?
Pardon?
What for you is Golden Age hip hop?
So for me, it's like 80s to like maybe mid 90s. I'm really interested in like sample heavy stuff, old like jazz and soul and blues and all that kind of stuff. And my brother lives in Japan. He's a DJ as well, and you can get these mix CDs in Japan. They only really make them in Japan, where they're like Japanese DJs mixing American hip hop. And every time I go to Tokyo, I'm like, I go insane, because you can go into record shops and buy these promo mixes, and I'm always like trying to find them. I went to a record shop in Perth, and the guy had loads of Japanese imports, and I was like hurriedly like rifling through them trying to find. I couldn't find any, but no, that's something I kind of, that's like something I always like, but I go in and out of obsession with it, and I'm in the middle of that obsession at the moment. I'm playing loads of it as pre-show music before my previews here, and someone left a review online saying, like, nothing good about the show, but saying he's got the best pre-show playlist at the Fringe.
Love it. Just ask you a few more. Body surfing, so that's got to be a little bit nice. Like, no offense to the wonderful Welsh coast, but it's got to be a little bit nicer and a little bit warmer in Australia doing that.
Yeah. That's I remember Rod once. We were in Caswell in Swansea, which is beautiful, like cold to be, and I was body surfing, and he was amazed. He was like, you're so awkward and and unskillful at anything, but you're very good at body surfing. Like, my father used to be a lifeguard, so he taught me how to do that, and it's good fun. You basically just turn yourself into a surfboard.
Nice. And by the way, when I say it's nicer in Australia, which it has to be, but anyone who's doing it in Wales, that's someone who's dedicated to the sport, as far as I'm concerned. If you're going out in the freezing cold of Wales surfing, my hat is well and truly off. Another music one. Music recorded at Fame Studios, Muscle Shoals. I don't know if there's meant to be a comment.
Yeah, no, that's another passion of mine. It's like a very famous recording studio in Alabama, and they had this like house band who were the Fame Gang, and these incredible musicians, and they back Aretha Franklin on and all these different like wonderful singers and songwriters. I make playlists on my iTunes. I'm a bit of a nerd. So I've got one here, the Muscle Shoals one. Who's on it? Yeah, so like the Rolling Stones, that Wild Horses, and Aretha Franklin, Respect, William Bell, I Forgot to Be Your Lover, Millie Jackson, Bob Dylan, Luther. It's basically like we're getting into real music nerd stuff now, and I'm starting to bore myself.
Okay. Just finally then, I love that this is on your list. Viz magazine. And when I was growing up, that was at the height of its fame. You had TV shows based on it with Billy the Fish and Roger Melly, the man on the telly. Tell us a bit about your love of Viz magazine.
I think my dad had Viz. He would read Viz magazine, and I remember he had to hide it in my parents' bedroom because I would read it, and he would get into trouble with my mum because it was like so rude or whatever. But that's something that my mum still gives me for Christmas every year, is the hardback, the compendium of the years, the annual, yeah.
Oh wow!
And I used to kind of obsessively read that. I think as well because I used to read the Beano when I was a kid, and those kids comics like the Beano and the Dandy and all that. It's like there's a lot of humor and stuff that Viz is like basically mimicking and making fun of those comics. And also, I used to love reading the letters, and the top tips and all that, and I would send some in myself, and I did get some published as well, actually. So I was like, yeah, I've written. When you're a new comedian, you're like, yeah, I've written for Viz. Well,
You're talking.
the
Sorry,
people that make.
I'm sorry, after you.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the people that make Viz are like great. Like they get sent all these jokes and use them for free. I mean, the ones they like, in a way.
I was only going to say, it's like we've talked about many an accolade that you've achieved throughout your career. I haven't seen you smile that big in the whole interview than when you got something published in Viz. That's great.
Yeah, that was that. There's some great stuff in there, and stuff that got like ripped off as well. I remember there was like they had like top tips in there that became they were using like McDonald's adverts or something. I think some person in advertising had just seen these jokes in Viz. They'd made them laugh, and they just stole them, and then they were on TV for like a McDonald's ad campaign. It was mad.
Cool. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. This will go out on the radio. As I said, it's on Tuesday on sw20radio.co.uk. I've got a little thing. Here we go. Yeah, Tuesday 6 till 8 on sw20radio.co.uk. Please do check it out, and we'll have some added tunes along with this chat. This one's not going to be going out this Tuesday, but the week after. Lloyd, we do like to offer on the show a chance for you to pick a track. Now, you're obviously into a lot of wonderful music. So is it going to be hip hop, which you've been listening to a lot recently?
I'll pick something from.
Is there some radio friendly hip hop as well?
Yeah, I'll pick something from my Muscle Shoals Fame Studio, the Swampers kind of playlist. So I'll pick Aretha Franklin. I never loved a man the way I loved you.
A bit of Aretha coming your way now if you're listening on the radio. But seems we're not. That'll just be an awkward moment for the video. Lloyd, could you just do me a favor? Just hang on the line for just a minute more after the credits play. I just was wondering if you could just quickly record a bumper or two for me.
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, but for a wonderful interview with Lloyd, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been Lloyd Langford. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. In a world where you can be literally anything, please be kind, he said, stalling while he finds the exit music. There you go. Now, the only thing is, I don't you can't switch to record from live. So we're just going to be live doing this. So anyone who's still watching this is bonus content for you. So would you mind just recording a couple of bumpers quickly?
Okay.
Actually, do you want me to type in the private chat what you've got to say? Then you can just be a bit easier.
Okay.
I didn't say it would be interesting bonus material for anyone who's listening still, by the way.
You put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just writing it in there's a little private chat thing.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just a second. Written this in advance. It's not as much of an essay as you might have imagined from that amount of typing, but I'm just, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Langford, and you're listening to SW20 Radio and the Dr. Squee Show. Drive home with the doc.
Could you also just do one, you're listening to SW20 Radio, the new sound of South Wales?
You're listening to SW20 Radio, the new sound of South Wales.
Okay, that's kept the radio bosses happy. Thank you so much, Lloyd. And bye to the audience. I'm just going to end broadcast now.